everyone, and welcome to Reimagine, the virtual blockchain conference. We're coming at you with our 11th event with some really exciting content. We're on the road, we're on tour, we are getting some high quality interviews with people both in person and virtually, like today, reporting back on what's going on in San Francisco, New York, El Salvador, all the biggest developments in NFTs and DAOs. I'm your co-host, Ashlie Meredith, and today I'm pleased to introduce you to Matthew Niemerg, president of the Aleph Zero Foundation. Hello, Matthew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks, Ashlie.
Yeah, thanks for being here. For anyone just tuning in, Matthew is a return guest. He was just on for our last event. So if you're curious, head on over to our YouTube channel, smash that subscribe button, check out Matthew's other interview. We're going to get some updates from him about Aleph Zero since the last time we spoke. Get to know him a little better and talk about the exciting world of what's going on in El Salvador, what's going on in DAOs, and what's going on in NFTs. So Matthew, can you give our viewers an update on what's going on with Aleph Zero since we last heard from you?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we just finished up our public sale, and we are in the process of launching the mainnet here on November 10th. So this is coming up here. I mean, today we're recording on, maybe I shouldn't say this, but we're recording on November 8th on Monday, and we are looking at around going to be launching our mainnet in 2 days' time.
Yeah, so when you all are tuning in, it should be live.
Yeah, that's my understanding. So we're really excited. This has been a long road, but essentially what we've been doing is having our testnet has been up and running for quite some time. I think we hit over 4 million blocks on the testnet. And essentially the same code base that's been used on the testnet is going to be migrated to our main net, and we'll have a Genesis event with everybody who's participated in the sale. We'll have their Genesis accounts, and we'll be able to access their coins. And even now you can still have the opportunity to test things out on the testnet, see how the network operates.
Excellent. So for anyone who didn't catch your first interview, can you give a brief explanation of what Aleph Zero is doing?
Sure. So what we're really working on is a new layer 1 protocol. What we did was essentially work on a consensus solution back in early 2018, and then that culminated in a peer-reviewed paper in 2019 at a conference that the ACM put together in Zurich. So this was at Advances in Financial Technology. So it's a sort of this new emerging tier 1 computer science conference. And what we did was go ahead and do various implementations of the protocol during sort of from late 2019 to 2020. Started looking at different technology stacks as to the blockchain framework that we could potentially use for the smart contract system. Ended up looking a little bit more deeper into Substrate and what the Web3 Foundation was supporting as far as using Substrate as a sort of a blockchain tooling system. And from there, went ahead and added in our consensus protocol into a generic Substrate blockchain node, and from there have been sort of running our DevNet and our testnet in this framework. So the idea of what we're really sort of doing is really focusing on foundational principles of math, computer science, building everything up from there. This is sort of the evidence from the consensus protocol. And then from there, we've been working on things like zero knowledge proofs, multi-party computation, really trying to hit on the various aspects of privacy whenever it comes to public blockchains and how you can achieve private states on or private data on public blockchains, which is, at least in our opinion, quite beneficial from a enterprise perspective and adoption.
Absolutely. So a new layer 1 protocol, meaning the same. It's a new token, a new blockchain, similar to Bitcoin or Ethereum. What are some of the benefits of your consensus mechanism?
So our solution is, I think probably for at least for me, I think what's the coolest aspect is the fact that it's fully leaderless, meaning that whenever you are operating or you have a group of people who are running this consensus committee, that at any point in time nobody is in charge. And so then because nobody's in charge, we don't necessarily have some centralized points of failures with various bottlenecks and whenever it comes to operating the protocol. And so I think from that perspective, I think from a meta view, this is just really cool to be able to say that you have no leaders and that you have a solution that is doesn't necessarily have any centralized choke points.
Absolutely. Well, so anyone who's interested in seeing how this works, mainnet will be live by the time you're watching this. So super exciting. And it really sounds like you are focusing on, like you said, first principles. You're a PhD in mathematics. So, starting with the basics of like how these consensus mechanisms work, algorithms, all of that. As you may know, Mousebelt has a university program where we invite students to come learn about blockchain, have a couple online courses for any students out there watching. Definitely head over to mousebelt.university, sign up for some of our courses, get funding for your events. So in building that program and speaking to people in the space who come from all sorts of different backgrounds, I always like to ask people, what would you say to maybe a mathematics student watching this, or maybe any student who's thinking about pursuing a career in blockchain?
So that's a phenomenal question. I would say that there is so many opportunities in this space that it doesn't matter your discipline or your area of study, or even if you're doing something in a formal education setting. So there's just so much. There's just such a need for talent in this space, whether that talent is coming from people with a 4-year bachelor's program, or people coming from just have finished high school, or are maybe a little disenfranchised with the education system, but are still competent and have various skill sets at their disposal. I don't think that we really have a real need to pigeonhole people that we want to bring to the space. And I think there's just so much, so many options out here for people. So you could be doing things in content production, as far as writing blog posts or Medium articles about how to use these different technology stacks, how to make this accessible to the layperson, people without the background that I have, for instance. How do you make it so that it's understandable and maybe a little bit more tangible, in the sense of what can you actually use these technologies for? Is what are the business applications? How can you actually drive industry interest and adoption this way? What are sort of and there's just such a a wide such a wide range of what people can do, that it's just really hard to say. So but I think that there's just so many projects out here that are looking for new talent. There are of course new projects that have yet to be built. So we're always looking for people, generally in the space, for people who want to innovate and create, be entrepreneurs. So yeah, I mean, just take a look and see what drives you, what's your passion, and then I'm sure that there's something out there for you.
Yeah, that is what is so exciting about the space, is that if you have a talent, you can kind of pursue that and add blockchain to it, because there's just so much need for talent in the space. Moving on to some of the themes of the conference, we're kind of seeing this digital takeover, or this just amplification of decentralization, kind of this unstoppable wave of people really accepting that the future of finance, art, culture, and collaboration is digital. We've got El Salvador now accepting Bitcoin, corporations converting themselves into DAOs, and as we were all just in NYC NFT, the NFT boom seems to show no signs of slowing down. So Want to get some of your thoughts on these topics. In September, El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender. What do you think about this decision?
I think as a means of getting away from the dollar monopolization that exists in the world whenever it comes to the World Bank and borrowing money from these sort of larger institutions, that it's a very good move. However, there were a couple of issues, at least from my understanding, and I think you guys have had, like you say, you have some boots on the ground in El Salvador, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but there were a few things I thought in the bill, at least whenever I was reading it, that were somewhat troublesome. One was the requirement that you had to accept Bitcoin as a payment option. And while it's great to be able to make Bitcoin a legal tender option, I don't think that requiring it was the correct choice, or at least under how that language was provided. And just because from a technology perspective, it becomes difficult for, small business owners or, vendors that might just be, selling wares on the street, to be able to provide support for the acceptance of Bitcoin. Not saying that they shouldn't, be able to find that kind of support, but requiring that could lead to just general problems. And is that am I correct in my understanding of the new law that was passed, that it was actually became a requirement that they had to accept it?
Yes. So the government in El Salvador made it requirement that businesses accept Bitcoin. Do you think that's a good or bad thing?
Yeah, I think that mandating it as a requirement is the incorrect choice, and that just allowing for it to be used and supporting it is probably more broadly from a voluntary action perspective the better way to go about it. And yeah, I think it's just also just more of a divide from the perspective of who has the ability of accepting payments this way, right? Not saying that, like if you're talking about a developing nation, it may not be the case that people have access to, different, like the Lightning Network or things like this. So it's not that these tools don't exist. It's not that people can't learn, but, most people are just trying to, live their lives day to day. They're working on their business. They don't have the capacity to go out and learn a completely new technology stack in order to comply with the new mandates.
Yeah, I believe there is like a lot of effort on the part of the government to provide like applications and, you know, readers and phones and wallets that will work simply. But at the end of the day, polls have been saying that up to 70% of El Salvadorians are against the idea. So.
But I mean, as far as a nation state wanting to hold Bitcoin in its treasury, right? I think it's brilliant. I think that it sort of shows the sort of progressive thought actions with respect to how the European Central Bank or the Federal Reserve are just inflating the monetary supply. And if you're a developing nation that's sort of dependent on these either the IMF or the World Bank for loans in order to, continue to develop your economy, then you're taking out a loan and an asset that is depreciating in value. And instead, if you're able to put that value into something else instead, that potentially is at least a store of value, or at least is it going to decrease in value based off of inflation, that's brilliant. And definitely, I wish more countries would be doing more, would be doing this.
Absolutely. So in lieu of requiring businesses to accept Bitcoin, what are ways that you think governments could incentivize people to, if that's the goal of their country, is to really put a big push behind crypto adoption or Bitcoin adoption specifically, how would you incentivize rather than mandate?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because as we know, being in crypto, it's all about the incentivizations, right? So I think maybe one would be paying taxes in Bitcoin. If we just think of from a high level perspective, what's the end goal of using any particular fiat system whenever it comes to a nation state sort of saying this has value? It's almost always is derived from the fact that they're using that same fiat currency as a means of payment for taxation. So as soon as you start decoupling that payment from the fiat currency from the payment of taxation, now you have a little bit more options and opportunity to sort of not be as dependent on that fiat currency. So I think that obviously that's a simple solution, just being able to pay taxes and say Bitcoin or Ethereum or what have you. The other thing is trying to have a better understanding of consumer economics and incentivizing people to be savers as opposed to spenders. How do you drive incentives in that way? Well, maybe you say that if you can prove on-chain activity that you weren't spending your Bitcoin for whatever reason, right? So you were able to show that this Bitcoin didn't move for 1,000 blocks or for 20,000 blocks, whatever it happens to be. It's just an arbitrary number. Maybe there's a tax break you could get. You can get a credit this way, or maybe there are loan programs for small businesses that you can do in crypto, or maybe you want to provide some other incentives for software developers or for crypto businesses to set up shop in your country. So, I mean, I think that there's all sorts of tools that governments have at their disposal for incentivizing citizens. And normally this comes down from tax policy. I mean, this is, if you look at in the States, for instance, most of the tax policy is based off of incentivizing certain types of behavior and disincentivizing other types of behavior. So I think that you have a lot of leeway to encourage businesses to create your blockchain tools, to accept crypto, to further the adoption. And almost always this comes from either grant programs or from tax incentivization schemes.
Yeah, I love the idea about incentivizing saving. Speaking of incentives and encouraging collaboration or certain behaviors or participation, one thing that has been gaining momentum as far as the conversations that we're hearing and the projects that are being launched are DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations. Are you particularly interested in DAOs? What interests you about them, or are there any projects that you think are effectively coordinating this way?
So I think DAOs are pretty cool. I think that the issue is more about the nebulous legal aspects surrounding DAOs, not whether or not they are just interesting from a community perspective and from sort of a way of bringing people from all over the world with collective interest together. That's fine. I think the problem then becomes, what is this thing legally? What is a DAO legally? And this is where I think a lot of the various nation states and governments are trying to wrap their heads around, because as soon as you have a DAO that's starting to generate profits or generate revenue, well, how do they they just want that tax money, right? They want to get a hold of it as much as possible, and get it as soon as possible. So then the question is, under what legal framework can they try to access and obtain some of these funds? And that's where I think we're going to see, as a community and as an industry, have some problems. Just because the current legal framework of these are just not well understood. Essentially they are unincorporated general partnerships, right? So you now have an unincorporated entity with people who participating in them, but without any liability or limited liability for the participants. So probably the best thing to do as an individual is to have your own limited liability company, or some type of some type of company that limits your liability, and then from there only interact with the DAO, right? I mean, this way you as a personal individual, as a natural person, don't necessarily have, maybe there's a hack for a particular DAO. Well, if you're a DAO member, are you legally liable for that hack and for those loss of funds? I mean, where does this, where does the line come to as far as that's concerned? So I think a lot of people just are thinking that this is a new thing. It's obviously a new paradigm. It's a new way of how to operate and to bring people together and potentially do business. But we do have an established legal framework for general partnerships or unincorporated entities and people like coming together in some type of common enterprise to generate profit. The other thing is maybe they're more akin to, say, a type of co-op, right? So you could say that these are, they're more membership co-ops. You use maybe a decentralized identity to prove your natural personhood, and then you could just join the co-op as a, or this DAO. And there are separate legal frameworks for co-ops that have a different setup than, say, than strictly, say, a partnership or a C corporation or an S corporation. So I think that there are some tools available to us inside of the current existing legal framework, but that we're really lacking the understanding of what the default is if we are starting to understand and to interact with these DAOs, right? And I think that's the problem that we have as a community and as an industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you covered kind of, some of the benefits and the drawbacks of DAOs. Any projects that you think are particularly interesting?
I wish I had the time to look into what was going on directly in the DAO space. I think that, probably more along the line, I've seen some stuff on some of these NFT DAOs where there's some either collective ownership or collective purchasing or decision making done by the DAOs. I think that there's some interesting stuff even whenever it comes to governance tokens, whenever with respect to treasury funds, particularly if you think of it as more along the lines of a public good, where you have treasury funds that are able to sort of do grant making opportunities to individuals or to teams, then and if the community is the one who's voting on this, I think that's a really interesting prospect as a broad view. I think there's what Kongland is I think is a DAO. I have some friends who are very heavy into that. I think that they're going to be really fascinating. I think there's going to be a lot more interest in them, but I think that the legal framework is really murky. And obviously we are in the Wild West of crypto, and often people tend to ignore the legalities in the space for some time. And we're starting to see, I guess, a little bit of the blowback with the infrastructure bill, and at least in the States, with not engaging in industry, or at least engaging with Washington, for instance. And it's causing it could cause some problems. And so I think without having a good, I don't want to say we need lobbyists, but in some sense we need lobbyists to push for appropriate laws that will protect us. And we are at a point in this industry where, it's a $300 trillion market cap now. Or it's insane, right? I maybe that's not even the right number. I should probably look at the right number. I'm pulling something out of my hat, but we do have the clout now to be able to really push for policy that benefits us, as opposed to just letting the lawmakers and the regulators decide for us. And I think that this is part of the growing up phase, and sort of I think it's just part of growing up in the space. We're seeing a lot more maturity. We're seeing a lot more interest with working with regulators. And while we can say that we don't care for regulators all we want in the space, that doesn't mean that they don't care about what we're doing, right? And at the end of the day, if they're able to legislate or do various things that can limit our ability of acting and creating innovations and pushing things forward, then we're essentially, I don't know. It's one of those things where we're essentially just cutting off our own foot, right? Like we're not really trying to, work with the rest of society. We're just saying that, oh, well, let's just go off and create our own society. Everybody else who doesn't get it, they can join us or not. But that's just not the way the world works. That's not the way that disruptive technologies operate. I mean, at some point you need to integrate with the rest of the world and the human population. And if we're not doing that in an appropriate way with reasoned logical debate or discussion regarding what these policy frameworks should look like and what they should be, then we're missing out on a lot.
Absolutely. So calling for more collaboration, right, with legislatures, and I think it really boils down to education too. We've been saying at Mousebelt for years, and with our university program, that education is kind of the foundation of the growth that's going to happen in this industry. You can't have these innovative technologies being built unless people know how to build them. Developer education. Education for mass adoption for the users, and then also for the people legislating on this. So speaking of like DAOs and some of these NFT collections that are launching as DAOs, we were all just in New York City for the NFT NYC event, got to meet a lot of NFT artists, see some of the work that they are selling. I think around that time, an NFT sold for $500 million. So it's been a kind of crazy boom. Interested to hear your thoughts. Why, or do you think that NFTs matter?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of ways to think about NFTs. One is, I mean, obviously we have digital art and we have sort of this provenance of ownership of the digital art. And in a lot of ways, NFTs is more about owning a piece of history, right? Of internet history. And it's not necessarily the case that, well, I don't necessarily get all the rights associated to, or either the copyrights or the rights to reprint or anything with these NFTs. What am I purchasing? I'm purchasing the provenance, right? The showing that, hey, I was a part of this history, I was a part of these communities, and that's it. Now, is that a good or a bad thing? I mean, I think that there's other use cases for NFTs beyond just strictly digital art. I think if it's more about being a part of the community and sort of showcasing, not necessarily ownership of a community, but early involvement with the community. And with the blockchain, you have the ability of seeing that provenance of when did you become a part of this community? When did you join? That's all time stamped on the blockchain. As far as other applications, I think we're going to see things like VIP access to particular events. We started seeing this I think in New York City. There were some events that you had to have the ownership of, like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, right? For instance, to go to some after parties or events or what have you. And so I think that we're going to see that, but that's also going to occur also in a digital framework, in a digital format. So if you have, say, a music artist that you're a big fan of, and they're putting on a concert, maybe they have a particular live stream where you get to see what's going on behind the scenes in the VIP backstage, or you get while they're before they do their encore, and they go back and they come and talk to the fans and such. So I think there's an opportunity for quite a bit beyond just digital art. It's more about access and proving ownership of, by having this item, you prove that you're supposed to be able to access particular things, whether or not it's fan-based materials for a community, whether or not it's like a key card for a location in a business. it really doesn't matter. And then the other bits are, how do you take NFTs and then maybe there's NFTs that are assigned to a decentralized identity, in the sense that you have like educational or like some type of certificate for trading, right? So you went through some coursework, you passed this class, and now you have this NFT. Well, that NFT is great. It's providing that provenance that you did the course, but you need to attach it to something. Well, you need to attach it to probably a decentralized identity. And now that decentralized identity could potentially be free floating, it's sort of attached to a natural person, which means that this NFT is attached to that natural person via the NFT, via the decentralized identity. And now you can go ahead and move it across multiple chains and so on and so forth. So I think that there's ways of moving beyond just digital art, community access, or what have you, to things where it's a little bit more tangible with respect to education, with respect to on-chain activity that you may have proven that you did. So maybe maybe you're running a validator node for several different networks, and you want to be able to prove that you have high maintenance, uptimes, and that you're able to continue to upgrade the network whenever there's forks or whenever there's a network upgrade or what have you. And whenever this happens, now you can maybe get an NFT badge to kind of help, booster your reputation, so to speak. And then you attach that to a decentralized identity. Now you have a validator that you're trying to run on multiple networks. And well, now people can trust that this validator is associated with this group of people, this validator group, and that they've have a track record of being online for quite some time, right? So I mean, there's all sorts of different mini applications like this that could be, I mean, at some point implemented or used later on. So yeah, I mean, in a lot of sense, NFTs are very similar to just a private key in sort of this public key infrastructure. So if an NFT is unique and it's not like, say, a artwork or what have you of 10,000 different pictures of a project, I mean, it's still a single product itself that has a unique identifier. And in a lot of sense, a private key is just a unique identifier associated to a public account. But now what we've done with NFTs is abstracted this away a bit, where that NFT is no longer directly associated to a single account. It is essentially separate and movable across accounts. And the question then becomes, well, what are the use cases? And I think that you could have, say, for instance, a company that has various secured locations on its campus for work. Maybe it's at a national lab, or maybe it's at a like IBM or Microsoft or any of these other companies, where there are certain access points where you're not allowed in if you don't, if you don't have access, right? And obviously people change and move jobs within these companies quite often, right? So you're going to have people that will go from one area that they're working on, and maybe, say, machine learning, they start going into doing, say, quantum computing, as an example. Say they're at IBM and there's like a secure lab that nobody else has access to. Well, that secure lab, that access point, could essentially be programmed as an NFT. And so that whenever somebody is moving jobs within the company and somebody else is taking over for you, you just send the NFT to somebody else, and then now they have access. You haven't really changed anything regarding the NFT itself, but the NFT is what's proving that you have the ability to gain access to a secure location, but you haven't necessarily changed you haven't done a lot of extra logic. So you sort of have decoupled the access rights with and assigning it to a particular individual, where an individual has their card, and instead you're saying that these access rights are embedded inside of an NFT, and now this NFT is movable between different persons.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that what I've always thought is a good use case for NFTs is on top of these digital art pieces, you have to add some sort of experience or access, right? It's not gonna last very long for people to care about a JPEG on the blockchain. But when you start incorporating these things like access and experiences, it gets really exciting, and that's definitely what we saw at NFT NYC. Well, thank you so much, Matthew, for sharing all your thoughts with us and updates about Aleph Zero. And for anyone just tuning in, we've been speaking with Matthew Niemerg. He's the president of Aleph Zero. By the time you're watching this, their mainnet is launched, so go check them out. Head over to our YouTube channel and see his other interviews. Smash that subscribe button, and thank you for tuning in. Stay around for more.